Okay, here comes the Derby chat. Familiar face, the legend, Justin Peach. Justin loves to talk about the championship this much. He likes to talk about Derby maybe this much, but mate, you're on Derby duty today, I'm afraid. How do you reflect on this? I know we're kind of magnetically drawn to this administration because it is the big story and it is the defining factor. And even though maybe it was a bit of a surprise that it played out in this way rather than a points deduction or some kind of takeover, how do you reflect on this first 11 games around the backdrop of this just huge event?
Yeah, I think just quickly jumping on the administration, I've barely thought about it over the past couple of weeks, mainly because of how well Derby have played. And that's the best position to be in. But jumping on the 11 games, we've been actually very, very good. It's been a pleasant surprise because you compare us to this time last season, we were absolutely terrible under Koku. And it was quite scary how bad we were, and we were on a very fast train to League One. Fast forward to now under Rooney, and we've got an identity, a style of play. We're a bit more pragmatic, so we're not nailed onto one system or style of play, and it's getting results. And the Swansea game at the weekend, it was a tough watch at times, but I imagine a lot of teams will go through the same thing with Swansea, and that's probably maybe the worst game we've seen Derby come up against, because we weren't quite at our best. But as I say, a lot of teams will face that with Swansea. So very positive 11 games so far, I think, and it completely clouds over the administration to some extent.
Where do you stand on Rooney now? Because I always, I still steal the term Trump derangement syndrome for Rooney. And I always talk about Rooney derangement syndrome because he's so famous and was such a good player. I don't think people see very clearly when it comes to Rooney. But all of a sudden, now this horrible administration has happened, people are kind of looking and saying, well, okay, how much better could he be doing? Like you mentioned, it may be relatively defensive, but it's a clear style of play. And I know you study the numbers, and they concede a reasonably high XG through accumulation of chances. So they don't give away big chances and have a very good defensive record. Where do you stand on Rooney now, Justin, and a job that's going pretty well?
Yeah, it's quite strange, isn't it? Because this, again, sort of going back to April time last season, I think a lot of people, probably 90% of the fan base, were Rooney out. We didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel on a Rooney, and fair play to him. He stuck with it. He's always honest. And what he's shown this season, again off the field, he's showing that he's a leader of the club. I think I've said previously that Derby haven't had a leader like that for a long, long time. We're going back to sort of potentially Nigel Clough years, maybe even further back, and you need that sort of individual and person. Or yeah, he was a leader, but not in the sense that Rooney's doing now. You could see that Keogh was happy to take all of the flack that opposition players, managers, and fans would give him, even his own supporters. But Rooney's coming out. He's standing very, very proud amongst the club, and he's representing everybody, which that's probably what I'm sort of getting at. And then on the pitch, as I said, like, we've got a clear identity now, and it's not boring football. It's exciting. We're not defensively vulnerable. We're incredibly solid. And as you say, we concede a lot of chances, but we don't concede clear-cut chances. And teams are struggling to cut Derby open. We have one of the best defensive records in the league now. And I'll vouch for Rooney here, and I'll say that Derby are just a good number 9 away from being a very, very good side. They need a goal scorer because they create chance. We're seeing balls coming in across the box, and there's just no one there to put them away. And it's frustrating, but it's position Derby are in. We'll take it on the chin, and we'll get on. But yeah, big thumbs up for Rooney. He's been brilliant so far this season.
Speaking of other thumbs up, which sort of individual players have stood out? I know the recruitment was kind of derided when it's a 35-year-old or a 36-year-old. Tom Lawrence as the captain. Who's stood out for you in this first 11?
It's really hard to pick one, which I'm sure a lot of people will say as you talk to them about any team. It's very hard to pick one player. I think Craig Forsyth has been brilliant, but he missed 3 games through a ban on a potential stamp on Tinkernagle in the East Midlands derby. Graham Shinney has been brilliant, but again, with the ball, he can be a bit loose. But I think if I'm going to pick one player, it'll be Max Bird. He's been so consistent this season, and he's been the player that we've needed sort of over the past 18 months. He looks very good with the ball at his feet. He's very comfortable, and he's got a steeliness, and he's a bit more physical now. Where he last season looked quite lightweight, and it was frustrating. He looked like a teenager, whereas now he looks like a fully developed adult, which is great on a football pitch because that's exactly what you need when you're up against it. And he's been absolutely brilliant so far. Won't get the numbers because he's not that type of midfielder, but yeah, he's a big reason as to why Darby are playing well this season.
Yeah, I really liked when it was Rooney and Bird in a double pivot, and it's been a bit strange with Barnsley, excuse me, Darby's. I've been doing a lot of interviews today with Darby's youngsters because at times Sibley has looked like he's going to be the one, or Bird when he first came in, no, he's going to be one, and Buchanan kind of leaping 50 feet in the air and playing at left back. So it's kind of I suppose it's kind of good that they've all stood out at different times, and this is after Bogle as well. Good to see him. I like the player a lot, and it did feel just I don't know if I'm being a bit unfair, but that he just dropped off a little bit last season, and now he's kind of back where he was.
No, definitely.
What's the best performance? What's your favourite performance? I know there's not been a lot of goals. Obviously, strategically, there's not been a lot of goals, but one's just popped into my head. I think I know what you're going to say. What's the best performance?
I tell you what, I won't go for the obvious one just yet. I'll say that the Stoke one definitely was just out of this world. Yeah. I've not felt emotion like that as a Derby supporter, probably ever. It was a weird sort of apathetic place to be in, coming into the ground, and then the passion and emotion that everyone was spilling out. It was fantastic. I think I've said before as well that there were people in tears before the game, as the well-known poem was read out before the game. And
We Are Derby.
It is a very poignant poem, especially from Derby.
It's one of the better openings you go to at stadiums.
Yeah, it certainly gets you fired up and emotional, as we saw, and just the performance was brilliant amongst the players. Curtis Davis was a warrior, and he's been a warrior since he's been at the club. Jagielka was fantastic. Max Bird's goal was just unreal. I don't think he's ever looked like he's going to score in a Derby shirt. Obviously, he scored in pre-season, but that goal was just unreal. Just every player to a man stood up for themselves. But the other performance I wanted to mention is the West Brom performance as well, the 0-0, the dogged performance.
Right.
At no point Derby looked like they were going to score, but it was backs to the wall sort of stuff, and it's exactly what you need when you're down there fighting for your lives. And they were great in that game as well. But definitely the Stoke result for sure.
Without digging anybody out, so say it in a positive way, and I'm not going to let you say Bielik because I want somebody who's kind of been playing. Who do you think can step up and maybe be a key player in the remaining 35 games?
It might be a bit harsh, but I'm still expecting Tom Lawrence to do something. It sounds harsh, but I've been frustrated with him this season because we saw in the Forest game, with his goal and his run, he was brilliant. He looked really good as a false nine. He was changing a lot with Morrison in that position, and Forest couldn't handle Derby. But we see the old Tom Lawrence at times as well, where he's very rash in his decision making. Where he'll pick the ball up on the left hand side, he'll come inside and he will shoot. And his free kicks, he'll do the same thing. He'll just put his laces through it. If he had any finesse about him, he would be such a much better player. And he's frustrated me at times, and he can't last the 90 minutes as well, which as a captain I feel like you need to do. I'm fully behind him as a player. I've always been behind him. He's just one of them that's always frustrated every Derby supporter because he's got the potential to do better.
I just go back to those days when he was on loan at Ipswich, and basically he was the best player there, and the instructions were do what you like, take all the set plays, shoot. and we'll keep a clean sheet behind you. And it feels almost like that type of indulgence is perhaps needed, but he's not going to get it in a team that concedes so few goals. This is a bit of a difficult question, obviously, because of the 12-point deduction. So I've been asking everybody, come back at Christmas, higher or lower. We need to not in a mocking way, because Darby, frankly, in terms of on-pitch performance, would be 14th. So they are not, by any stretch, the 24th best team in the division. But they are 6 points adrift of the Posh and Barnsley and 7 of Hull. Forget any potential looming 6 or 9 point deductions. Is there any chance, maybe not Christmas is a fair answer, is there any chance they can get off the bottom at any point here?
I look at Peterborough and I think you don't look like a championship side at the moment. And that's putting my second tier hat on, being a very sort of overall view of the championship. They just look nowhere near a championship side. And if Derby can catch them up, that's one team that they've caught up with. The next one is potentially Barnsley, again under Marcus Shop. They look absolutely hopeless. And again, that's putting the championship hat on there.
You can mention a Reading deduction without mentioning a Derby deduction if you want to throw another one in.
I actually think Reading could finish mid-table even with a deduction, or a lower mid-table.
Even a 9?
Well, if you're winning games with less than 0.1 XG, then
so good. Yeah.
then you're on to a winner there. But I do think Derby can get off the bottom at some point. It's just whether or not they can stay off the bottom, because we saw in the game against Swansea there was no Jagielka, there was no Baldock, and Derby struggled. They had to put Forsyth in the middle with Curtis Davis at centre back because Stearman went off injured. Jack Stretton, very good youngster, but again, having the experience of Baldock will help. And if they can get Bielik back and Colin Kazim Richards back before Christmas, that's an added bonus. But it's so difficult. It's so difficult to predict what Derby can do, because this small squad, added deductions. But I'd be happy if they can sort of get in and around out the bottom three.
It would be sensational, wouldn't it? Absolutely sensational. Because there was a point where everybody was just like, "Oh well, that's that done then." That's one of our relegated teams. But you never know. There are scenarios. I've been asking everybody for a grade then, Justin, and I assume it'll probably be a fairly positive one once you take into account the overarching circumstance. What do you think in terms of a letter grade?
I would give them an A. Had it not been for the Peterborough result, and I'm trying to think of another, because there was a couple of games at the start of the season where we collapsed a little bit. The Peterborough result definitely, and Birmingham City result, that's the one. They're the two games where the last 10 minutes against Peterborough they were really poor, and obviously conceded twice to them in the 100th minute or whatever. And then the Birmingham City result, not so good. So I'd give them a B+. Again, it's a lot of context with Derby. It has to be. And what they're doing with their squad at the moment is just unheralded. And when you look at the squads, comparing other squads around, the likes of Peterborough, for me, I've got a better squad with more depth. Same with Hull, Barnsley, every team that's down there at the moment. So what they're doing at the moment is just absolutely spectacular. So it's a B+. It would have been an A had it not been for those two results in particular.
Sure thing. And you can do some plugs, and one of them may even benefit me as well.
Well, yeah, you can obviously catch me on the Second Tier podcast at the Second Tier. I'll be on with Ryan. We do a show every week, or two shows every week. And obviously you can catch the show on Football 365, where you'll catch Ben Bloom, ourselves, Ryan and me, and obviously Ben HD as well on the Football 365 Championship Chat.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Love to chat with those guys. Every Tuesday, you think you've got your head around the weekend and something else always kind of comes up. I find it a really good kind of test of, right, am I tuned in with what? Because I know one of these other guys will say something that I haven't thought about if I haven't thought about it. So really enjoying that collaboration. Great to speak to you, Justin. And between you and I'll no doubt be speaking to you tomorrow morning, yeah?
Yeah, most definitely. Always a pleasure.